In today's case, we are covering the Cape Town prostitute killer, also known as the Cape Town Strangler. He is an unidentified South African serial killer based in Cape Town who strangled 16 prostitutes as well as 3 domestic workers back in 1992 to 1996. He would pick up the victims in rainy days and strangle them in his car and dump their bodies in pre-selected areas or locations. The weirdest thing is that none of the victims were sexually assaulted, although they were staged as if they were. One suspect was arrested in connection to one of the murders, however was released a year later due to lack of evidence, and it was proven that some of the evidence pinned against him was false. Now, how were these murders committed? He would pick up his victims at the Voortrekker strip and park his car at a parking lot. He would then order his victim to remove their clothes and then he would hit them in the face. All of these victims had similar injuries, which was to the jaw. He would then force them onto his lap and then strangle them to death. And then he would drive them to a pre-selected location and then leave the body there. Unfortunately, the rain will wash away the tire tracks and any other forensic evidence. The perpetrator staged the crimes basically to derail the investigators in linking them to one offender. He will shallowly bury the victims. He will pose them in a sexual manner to make it seem as though they were sexually assaulted. However, no semen was found or forced penetration on any of the victims, which might suggest that the perpetrator was sexually dysfunctional. He left the bodies in different areas and locations. However, he left out of places to leave the bodies after his 11th murder, which led to the crimes being linked. Because the crimes were being linked, the prostitutes started giving their fingerprints to the police and having their photographs taken so that they are easily identified in case they are murdered. So law enforcement started standing up and handing out posters with emergency numbers. Pimps and prostitutes were writing down registration numbers of vehicles that picked them up, but unfortunately, 7 more murders occurred. One of the victims, a 39-year-old Gloria Samuels, was found heavily decomposed with a Coke bottle in her private area. Talk about sick. The last victim, Teresa van der Vint, a 16-year-old prostitute, decided to stay out a little longer to find clients at Old Fair Road near Eerste River. This was on the 15th of May 1996. The perpetrator then approaches and picks her up, and a few hours later she was found dead, half naked, off the footpath near Massacre Beach. Her skirt was pulled up, her legs spread apart, her jacket was tied around her face and her neck. Her cause to death was due to strangulation, presumably with the ligature. She was the 19th and youngest victim. So one day, one of the prostitutes reached out to a surgeon to advise that there is an elderly man who always fantasized about putting coke in women's genitals. He was an elderly and unemployed man who stayed in a caravan along Voortrekker Road. He had difficulties getting erect and often socialized with prostitutes. He drove a blue and white bakkie which matched the description of the vehicle which was found close to the body of Miss Samuels, the 39-year-old woman. His ex-wife even stated that he would disappear hours at a time without stating his whereabouts. Now listen to this. He said that he had blackouts and suffered from amnesia. However, when he was taken to the hospital after Samuel's body was found, the doctors confirmed that there were no signs or no symptoms of memory loss. April 1996, the detective brought him in for questioning, and he said that even though he might have killed the woman, he wouldn't have memory of it. He was released and remained free until 29 June 1996. So on that day, he decides to call the police station and say that once his bakkie is in working order, more women will be killed. The call was recorded, which matched the suspect's voice, which led him to being arrested and taken to Pollsmoor Penitentiary. Now, while at the prison, he then befriends a man called Norman Afzal Simmons, the station strangler. Of course he did. I will do a separate story about him. So, in closing, a search was done on the bakkie, which a fingerprint was found which belonged to one of the victims. He was then charged of the murder but was released in September 1997, so a year later, due to lack of evidence. Now, this absolutely breaks my heart. Years later, a police officer was exposed for planting one of the fingerprints, one of the victim's fingerprints on the vehicle. Now, remember when I started the case, I said a man was accused of a murder but was released due to lack of evidence. And the case ends by saying that a police officer was exposed for planting the victim's fingerprints. So my question would then be, was the perpetrator ever found? Let me know what you guys think of this case, because it is crazy. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.